Have you ever fallen for someone only to realize you were mostly in love with the idea of them? Not who they were, but who you thought they were. Like the person you thought you knew, the one who made your heart race, who felt so familiar and right, was never really there at all. It's as if you were in love with a ghost, a figure shaped more by your imagination than by their reality. This haunting feeling isn't just heartbreak. It's a message from the depths of your psyche. Carl Jung believed that our unconscious minds are not just hidden, they're structured. He called these structures archetypes, ancient patterns of human experience. And among the most powerful of these are the Anima and Animus, the inner feminine in men, and the inner masculine in women. They aren't about gender expression or stereotypes. They're symbolic forces, blueprints for how we relate to others and how we relate to ourselves. But when we don't recognize them, they leak out. They possess us. They shape how we see others, not as they are, but as projections of our own inner world. We fall in love not just with people, but with mirrors, with ideals, with fragments of ourselves dressed in someone else's body. And when the projection fades, so does the illusion. So here's the question. What if your relationships aren't just about connection, but about revelation? What if every heartbreak, every deep attraction, every argument was really a conversation with your own soul? Let's dive into one of the deepest, strangest truths about love. You might not just be loving them. You might be loving a part of you that you've never met. Relationships are the most emotionally intense experiences most of us will ever have. They exhilarate us. They wound us. They reflect the best and sometimes the worst of who we are. We chase connection. We long for understanding. And yet, we often find ourselves stuck in the same cycles, drawn to the same kinds of people, having the same fights, feeling the same pain. Even when the faces change, the patterns stay the same. Why? Carl Jung, Swiss psychiatrist, visionary thinker, and founder of analytical psychology, believed that love and attraction are never random. He argued that they are shaped by unconscious forces we barely understand. At the core of Jung's theory is the concept of the Anima and Animus. According to Jung, the Anima is the archetype of the feminine that lives in the unconscious of every man. She appears in dreams, fantasies, ideals. She is the source of emotional life, intuition, creativity, vulnerability, receptivity. The Animus is the archetype of the masculine within every woman. He is reason, authority, opinion, structure, drive. These archetypes aren't simply learned behaviors. They're ancient symbols, reflections of something deeper than personal history. They are the way the psyche organizes experience, especially experiences related to gender, identity, intimacy, and power. But here's the problem. We're usually unaware of these forces. And what the unconscious hides, it projects. So we see the anima in a woman's eyes. We feel the animus in a man's voice. And we begin to believe that they complete us, that they are us. But what we're really seeing is ourselves. This is why so many relationships feel like déjà vu. Why we fall for people who reflect something we don't fully understand. Why we keep chasing emotional highs that feel meaningful until they collapse into confusion or disappointment. Understanding the Anima and Animus isn't about psychology for psychology's sake. It's about liberation. It's about clarity. It's about finally being able to say, this is me, that is you. And now, we can truly meet. So before we dive deeper, take a moment and reflect. Have you ever loved someone, only to later realize you never truly saw them at all? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's start this dialogue, not just with each other, but with ourselves. To understand how the Anima and Animus shape our relationships, we first need to understand what Jung meant by an archetype. In Jungian psychology, archetypes are not characters or personalities. They are patterns, deep, universal patterns embedded in the human psyche, like inherited blueprints of how we experience life. Think of them as psychological DNA, passed down not through genes, but through centuries of myth, religion, and human memory. You see them everywhere: the hero, the mother, the trickster, the shadow. These are all archetypes, structures that shape the stories we tell, the roles we play, and the way we interpret the world around us. But Jung believed that among these, two stand out in their power over our emotional lives: the anima and the animus. The anima is the inner feminine presence within a man. She is not just softness or passivity. She is emotion, imagination, mystery, intuition. She is the muse, the dream, the gentle or wild feminine energy that calls a man into depth. The animus is the inner masculine presence within a woman. He is not just aggression or strength. He is thought, opinion, authority, and conviction. He appears as the voice in her head that says, "This is how it is." Sometimes firm, sometimes wise, sometimes oppressive. Now, it's crucial to understand, these archetypes are not about external gender roles. They're not saying that women are emotional and men are logical. Instead, Jung believed that the psyche is fundamentally androgynous. Every person contains both masculine and feminine energies. The anima and animus are the psychic representations of these energies in symbolic form, and because they reside in the unconscious, we're usually unaware of their influence. We don't recognize them directly. Instead, we experience them projected onto others. A man who hasn't integrated his anima may seek out women who perfectly embody his inner idea of femininity, whether that's the nurturing mother, the seductive siren, or the unattainable ideal. He doesn't see her clearly. He sees his own unconscious image of what woman is supposed to be. A woman who hasn't integrated her animus may be drawn to men who seem powerful, rational, or assertive, not because of who they truly are, but because they reflect her inner idea of masculinity. These archetypes don't just influence who we're attracted to. They influence how we relate, how we argue, how we communicate, what we expect, what we fear, what we fantasize about. They shape our deepest beliefs about what love should feel like and what kind of partner we think we deserve. Left unconscious, the anima and animus become tyrants. They pull us into illusion. They make us fall for people who are symbolic, not real. They lead to disappointment, confusion, and recurring patterns that feel painfully familiar. But once we begin to see them, once we can name them, work with them, integrate them, they become something else entirely. They become guides. The anima becomes the voice of the soul, deepening a man's emotional life and connection. The animus becomes the force of clarity, empowering a woman's voice, vision, and sense of self. Together, these archetypes lead us not just toward better relationships with others, but toward a fuller, more balanced relationship with ourselves. And that's where the journey really begins. Romantic relationships are where the anima and animus show themselves most vividly, because it's through love, longing, conflict, and intimacy that our unconscious has the greatest opportunity to surface. When Jung described the anima and animus, he wasn't talking about cute quirks or harmless fantasies. He was describing forces, active presences in the psyche that shape how we see others, how we connect, and how we suffer. Let's start with a familiar scene. A man meets a woman, and instantly, something awakens in him. It's more than attraction. It's enchantment. She seems magical, radiant, deep. It feels like he's known her forever. But what he's really meeting is not just her. It's his anima projected onto her. She becomes the embodiment of his inner longing for feeling, connection, softness, mystery. Not because she is all those things, but because something in her triggered a mirror. For a while, everything feels perfect. He's inspired, alive, devoted. But over time, the illusion fades. She has flaws, boundaries, a whole personality of her own. And now, confusion sets in. He may feel betrayed, not by her actions, but by the fact that she's not the fantasy. He might withdraw. He might try to change her. He might even resent her for not being the dream he projected onto her in the first place. Now flip the lens. A woman finds herself irresistibly drawn to a man who seems confident, decisive, maybe even a little cold. He feels powerful, like he knows exactly what he wants. He carries the promise of protection, direction, stability. What she's encountering is her animus, not the man himself, but the image of masculine authority projected from her own unconscious. At first, she might feel elevated by his presence, like she becomes more grounded or purposeful around him. But over time, his dominance might feel like control. His certainty might feel like arrogance. And she may begin to feel unseen, unheard, silenced. This is the classic dance of projection. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with what they reflect back to us. And this doesn't only happen in straight relationships or according to traditional gender roles. The anima and animus appear across all identities. What matters is the polarity, the symbolic masculine and feminine energies that we all carry, regardless of how we identify or express ourselves. Understanding this gives us enormous power, because the moment we see the pattern, we're no longer trapped inside it. We begin to understand why we keep chasing emotionally unavailable people, why we lose ourselves in the beginning stages of love, why we feel crushed when someone we idolized turns out to be human, and we stop blaming them. We start doing the inner work. It also helps us navigate the subtleties of power in relationships. When two people are both unconsciously projecting their anima and animus, it can feel electric, mystical even, but it's unstable. The relationship is built on fantasy, not reality. When one person begins to withdraw their projection, when they start seeing the other person as they are, not as they represent, it can feel like betrayal. The spell breaks. But if both partners begin to do this work, if they become conscious of their projections and start to integrate these inner archetypes, it creates a new kind of relationship. One based not on fantasy, but on mutual recognition. You stop needing the other person to complete you. Instead, they become a companion on the journey toward your own inner wholeness. This isn't the stuff of fairy tales. It's something richer, more grounded, and ultimately, far more fulfilling. Because when you stop using someone else to carry your soul, you finally start to meet them soul to soul. Let's talk about attraction. That instant spark, that magnetic pull, that feeling of, this person just gets me. What if I told you, much of that is happening inside you, not because of who they are, but because of what they represent? The anima and animus heavily influence who we're drawn to, often without our conscious awareness. They shape not only what we find attractive, but why. We think we're choosing partners freely, but much of the time, we're simply gravitating toward people who carry the symbolic traits of our unconscious inner figures. For a man, this might look like craving emotional depth, mystery, sensuality, qualities he associates with his inner anima. He might find himself repeatedly drawn to women who seem sensitive, nurturing, artistic, or emotionally intense. But here's the catch. He may not be seeing them. He's seeing her, the anima. And that projection, over time, creates friction. For a woman, attraction to the animus might manifest as admiration for confidence, assertiveness, intellectual depth, or charisma. She might be magnetized by men, or symbolic masculine energies, who appear strong, certain, dominant. But again, the same danger exists. She may not be relating to the actual person, but to her internal image of what masculine power should look like. This is why attraction can be so intense and also so misleading. When we fall under the spell of archetypes, we don't fall for complexity. We fall for symbols, and those symbols don't always survive real-life interaction. Now let's bring in communication, because this is where things get even more complicated. The anima is often linked with qualities like emotional fluidity, subtlety, and sensitivity. So, a man dominated by his unconscious anima might either over-identify with emotional expression or completely suppress it out of discomfort or fear. He might expect his partner to just understand his emotional state without needing to articulate it. He might be deeply hurt by small things and struggle to express why. On the other hand, The animus tends to communicate in certainty, in argument, in opinion. So, a woman influenced by her unconscious animus may engage in communication that feels overly critical or overly rational. She may experience inner voices that are judgmental, rigid, or perfectionistic, and project that onto her partner. Now imagine these two styles colliding. He's emotionally reactive but vague. She's clear but cold. Neither is truly present. Each is interacting with an inner fantasy while speaking to a living, breathing human being. And this, right here, is where miscommunication lives. It's not that men and women, or any partners of any gender, naturally miscommunicate. It's that we're often having two conversations, one with the person in front of us, and one with the archetype inside us. So how do we start to change this? The first step is awareness. Start noticing patterns. What traits instantly attract you? What qualities in your partner consistently trigger you? Do you find yourself idealizing new partners early on? Do you expect them to fulfill a role rather than just be who they are? Next is depersonalization, realizing that your reactions may say more about you than them. If something they say makes you feel dismissed, ask, is this truly them being dismissive? Or is it my animus reacting to a challenge to my authority? If you're longing for emotional closeness and feel your partner is distant, ask, is this really about them? Or is my anima needing attention and I'm externalizing that need? Finally, develop communication grounded in presence. Practice naming what you feel without blame. Practice listening without trying to fix or assert control. Practice separating the symbolic from the actual. This work isn't easy. It's humbling, sometimes even humiliating. But it's also liberating, because when you learn to recognize the archetypes at play, you begin to speak, not from your wounds or fantasies, but from your truth. And when that happens, when both people begin to see and speak from who they are, not what they've projected, communication becomes communion. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Nowhere is that more true than in our relationships. We like to think we fall in love because of compatibility, chemistry, or common goals. But often, what pulls us towards someone, and what eventually drives us apart, has much more to do with what we're projecting onto them. Projection is one of the core mechanisms through which the anima and animus operate. It's not malicious, it's not conscious, it's simply the psyche's attempt to see itself by assigning its unclaimed parts to someone else. When we project, we take an unconscious part of ourselves, an inner need, wound, fantasy, or fear, and we overlay it onto another person. We're no longer relating to them. We're relating to a story we've unconsciously written about them. This is why early love feels so magical. Why we say things like, "I feel like I've known you forever. You're everything I've been looking for. We're soulmates." What we're really saying is, you match something deep inside me I didn't even know was there. At first, it's intoxicating, but over time, cracks appear. Because reality doesn't behave like fantasy. The partner doesn't live up to the projection. They push back, they change, they reveal sides that don't fit the ideal. And the same mind that once idealized them now begins to criticize or resent them. This is the emotional whiplash of projection. From obsession to disappointment. From adoration to irritation. From, "you complete me," to, "you're not who I thought you were." So how do we break the cycle? The first step is recognizing when projection is happening. Here are a few clues. You feel an instant, overwhelming connection with someone you barely know. You put them on a pedestal, or completely demonize them. You assign deep meaning to their smallest actions. You feel like you can't live without them, or like they owe you emotional completion. You're repeatedly disappointed, even though you can't clearly explain why. Once you see the projection, the work begins, withdrawing it. This doesn't mean abandoning the relationship. It means re-owning what you've projected. That longing you felt, it's your anima calling you to reconnect with emotion, beauty, or creativity. that admiration for their strength. It's your animus asking you to develop your own clarity, willpower, or voice. You reclaim those qualities as parts of yourself. And from there, something powerful happens. The other person is no longer responsible for completing you. They are no longer a canvas. They become a person. Of course, this shift can be disruptive. It often causes temporary distance or conflict, because both people are suddenly being seen not as symbols, but as humans, with flaws, needs, contradictions. But this is where real intimacy begins. Without projection, we can actually choose to love, not just reactively attach. We can say, I see you, not as an ideal or enemy, but as you, and I still choose to stay present with you. This kind of conscious relationship is rare. It requires self-awareness, emotional maturity, and a willingness to be wrong about our own minds. But it's also the only kind of relationship where growth is possible. Because when you no longer demand that someone else carry your shadow, your unmet needs, or your forgotten desires, you make room for something sacred, real connection, real dialogue, real transformation. Projection isn't the enemy. It's the beginning. The real work is in catching it and turning it inward. Because the truth is, we're not just seeking a partner. We're seeking the parts of ourselves we lost along the way. At this point, you might be wondering, if the anima and animus keep interfering in our relationships, causing projections, confusion, and pain, what can we actually do about it? The answer lies in one of Jung's most important concepts, integration. To integrate the anima or animus means to become conscious of these inner forces, to stop seeing them solely in others, and begin experiencing them as aspects of yourself. It means moving from projection to ownership. This is not a quick fix. It's a deep psychological and spiritual process. It's the path toward what Jung called individuation, becoming a whole, integrated human being. Let's break it down. For men, integrating the anima. A man begins to reclaim his anima when he stops expecting women to provide emotional salvation. He no longer looks for a mother, a muse, or a manic pixie dream girl to fill the emotional void he won't face himself. Instead, he begins to develop emotional literacy, honor his creativity and intuition, become comfortable with vulnerability, not as weakness but as power. Listen to his dreams and fantasies as expressions of his soul, not demands for external fulfillment. The more he listens to his inner anima, the less he needs to chase her in the outside world. He becomes whole, not dependent on the feminine to make him feel alive. For women, integrating the animus. A woman integrates her animus when she stops outsourcing authority. She no longer needs a man or any external structure to define her direction, value, or strength. Instead, she begins to trust her thinking, develop her voice, set boundaries without guilt, lead with both logic and heart, recognize the difference between being heard and needing to dominate. She moves from being controlled by harsh inner critics to having an internal ally, an animus who serves rather than rules. And again, the result is wholeness. She no longer needs the masculine to validate her worth or path. So what happens when both partners begin to integrate? They stop relating from neediness and start relating from abundance. They're not looking to be completed. They're looking to be understood. They're not afraid of difference. They're curious about it. They can handle tension without collapsing. They don't demand perfection. They seek presence. This is where relationships become transformative. Because both people are doing the inner work of balancing their own energies, their connection becomes a space for mutual evolution, not emotional outsourcing. How do you begin integrating your anima or animus? Start small, start inward. Here are a few practices. 1. Reflect on your attractions. Ask yourself, what qualities do I consistently seek in others that I don't fully embody myself? That may point to an unintegrated archetype. 2. Reclaim projection. Next time you feel obsessed with someone or intensely triggered by them, pause. Ask, What part of me am I projecting onto this person? Write it down, name it, sit with it. 3. Cultivate the opposite energy. If you're overly rational or cut off from feeling, explore art, journaling, time in nature. If you're overwhelmed by emotion or indecisiveness, practice setting goals, expressing opinions, speaking firmly. Balance doesn't mean eliminating traits. It means owning the full range of who you are. 4. Dream work. Jung believed the Anima and Animus often appear in dreams. Track recurring figures in your dreams, especially romantic, mysterious, or confrontational ones. Ask, what part of me are they showing up as? 5. Inner dialogue. Try speaking to these inner figures, literally. In journaling or meditation, ask your Anima or Animus a question. Let them answer in their voice. It might feel strange at first, but over time this creates a deeper relationship with your own psyche. This work takes time. It doesn't guarantee a perfect relationship, but it does guarantee a more conscious one, and in a world that constantly tells us to find the one. Maybe the deeper question is, can you become the one your unconscious is trying to meet? That's the beginning of true love, not just with another person, but with your own soul. So what does all this mean for you, for me, for the way we love? It means that relationships aren't just romantic experiences. They're revelatory ones. They expose the unconscious parts of ourselves we didn't know we were carrying. That moment you felt utterly seen by someone? That was your Anima whispering, "This is what your soul longs for." That fight you couldn't explain? That was your Animus screaming through projection, trying to assert control. That cycle you keep repeating in relationship after relationship? It's not bad luck, it's not fate, it's your psyche trying to evolve, using love as the mirror. Jung didn't say this would be easy. He said it would be essential. Because until we know our inner world, we'll keep mistaking others for our unfinished stories. But once we begin the work of integration, we stop chasing illusions, we stop blaming our partners for the ache inside us, and we start forming relationships built not on fantasy, but on freedom. Freedom to see, freedom to feel, freedom to love, not blindly, but consciously. So here's the final question I'll leave you with. Who have you loved? Not for who they were, but for who they reflected back to you. And who might you become if you stopped looking outward for the pieces you've yet to meet within? Let this be an invitation, not to fix your relationships, but to deepen them, to become more intimate with your unconscious, to start the journey not just of love, but of self-knowledge. And if you found something here today that made you pause, reflect, or feel a little more seen, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your patterns, your questions. Let's keep this conversation real. Like this video if it sparked something. Subscribe if you want more philosophical insights into the parts of yourself no one else is talking about. Because this, right here, isn't just about psychology. It's about waking up. And love might just be the deepest form of awakening there is.